Hi, this is Dr. Scott Young, and today we have Punisher Dallas here. So we have a lot of fun stuff here, and we're going to talk about some banking issues and some wealth management stuff coming right up. So, hey, man, how you doing?
I'm good. It's been a long day. It's been back to back to back to back shows, but it's been a good day. It's been a good week. How about you?
I'm just a little annoyed at the whole world, just how it is. I mean, you're annoyed, I'm annoyed, and sometimes, not annoyed at everything, but just annoyed at some things, so.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't. It's not working the way that I would do it, but something tells me that that's for a reason.
Oh yeah, and they don't want to do it the way Scott would do it. So yeah. That's I'd have done this sucker a long time ago. So
Oh yeah,
whatever. But Dianne Feinstein's dead. I'm like, the witch is dead, so I don't care. And people are like, you're rude. You're mean about this stuff. And I'm like, listen, you harm children, put a millstone around your neck. Mm-hmm. Sucks to be you. That's just how I am. Then at the same time, we got Katie Hobbs gone for a day. No governor. And I've had people kind of talking about this. I know Chaz was talking about this, and with some of that stuff. And I'm like, no governor leaves for a day. Governors leave for DC or any place else and go for meetings for a day, right? Happens all the time. And they leave for a day and for all kinds of reasons, or even go on vacation, but they don't leave their opposite. She's a Democrat, and she brings in a Republican treasurer to take over. Now, here's the fascinating part that no one wants to talk as a political thing. She actually should have her deputy, or whatever you call that, whatever you call the
deputy director, I think is what they're called.
Director, governor, whatever, the deputy governor, whatever that position you call it. And someone's going to type it in and get it. Thank you for it, guys. But the point is, that is a elected position, and you would never do that for one day. And then that same person, that Republican, why wouldn't you just get the Democrat that you would do it?
Well, and not only did she skip over the first natural succession, but she skipped over the second natural succession.
You don't do that for a day. You don't do that. And you would only do that if you're deathly ill. And it's just,
or if she was going in under anesthesia, like for a president, right? Like you put the vice president in order if you're going in under anesthesia, but
if you were going for a higher position, like you were going to be a vice president or you're going to be a president, like LBJ did that, because he was moving into that position. And you wouldn't do it for a day. It's a calm, guys. It's a calm. I don't care what any other truther says. It's an absolute calm, and it happens on the same day that Feinstein's dead. I don't need any more help on this one. So anyway, sorry.
It's been a crazy day. It's been lots and lots. New York City is literally flooding.
Yeah, dripping. Right. Yeah. So anyway, let's just get on to our stuff here. So let's jump over some of that stuff here. So I'm going to throw in my little my questions to you, and I just would love you to kind of think outside the box on our kind of stuff here, and then you can kind of say from your banking and your wealth management kind of things. I didn't say, I'm not saying you worked in banking. Your background is 13 years as a wealth manager, and you have all of the testing abilities out there. I mean, all this stuff. Could you talk a little bit about that before we kind of, jump
Yeah,
off that
I
one?
mean, it's funny because the word credentials get brought up a lot. When you go to, I'll give you the example between the difference between a wealth manager at a bank and what I do. When you go to Wells Fargo or Chase or Bank of America and you meet with the wealth manager, they're not a wealth manager by title. Well, let me rephrase. They're a
Well,
wealth manager
they're
only.
mostly a flunky. I mean, underneath. I'm sorry, but they're a flunky underneath the whole bank.
Correct. They're an employee. They're a wealth manager by title only, right? Meaning they can't technically write any business. They can't take your money and put it into the market. They can't buy mutual funds. They can't buy individual stocks because they don't have the credentials to do that. I'm a wealth manager in the sense that I have taken all the tests. I've taken the 63, 7. I studied for the 12. Well, you don't want to take the 12, but I have the credentials to back up because otherwise I couldn't do my practice. Like you have to be legally credentialed in order to do the different functions in investment, right? And insurance and investing, life insurance and things like that. So I have all of those. Right after we get off this call, I've got to update my licenses in 4 states because it expires on the 30th of my birthday month, which the
Oh,
30th
super
is tomorrow.
fun for that one. Holy cow.
Yeah. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma is the most expensive. It's $250 to renew my license, not to
Yeah.
get it, to renew it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I point that way because Oklahoma is literally, it's like an hour and a half that way or 45 minutes that way. But so I've been in the industry for 13 years. Well versed. I have a team of men and women that are even more qualified than I am. I mean, we have CFPs, we have CLUs, we have I have one member of the team that's literally a financial attorney. So he has his doctorate and he has a degree in financial. I would have to figure out. I knew it, but he's literally a financial attorney. Like he's a past the bar,
Wow.
but purely from a financial institutional standpoint, right? So all the FCC regulations and FINRA regulations and all that stuff, like that's what he studies and that's what he specializes in. Yeah, that's my background. I'm an anomaly. I didn't get into the industry like everybody else. Usually you're recruited into it or you're referred into the industry. I was running, I was working for Enterprise Rent a Car. I was running 3 locations that were all multi-million-dollar locations.
Really? So you have that
And
business background idea of that.
yeah, very successful on that side. My time with Enterprise was no longer mutually beneficial. That was the verbiage that was used because the new RVP and I didn't see eye to eye. He made some statements and made some promises, and then didn't even attempt. Like if you make a promise and I can see that you're trying to make it happen and you
Right.
just come up short, well, that's one thing. But when you make a bona fide, it wasn't even a promise; it was a statement. This is my number
We're gonna
one
pay you
priority.
this.
Yeah. And then nothing happens.
Yeah.
And I'm the dumb butt that's like, 6 months ago you said this. So yeah. So I was summariously, or unsummariously, my partnership was dissolved with Enterprise. But I updated my resume and they called me. So I got called by a recruiter. So technically I got recruited, but I didn't get referred. Like that's how you get into the industry. So they called me out of the blue and it's just something that I'm good at. I'm good with numbers, I'm good with math, and I'm good at communicating, which 90% of 90% of wealth management is being able to communicate the concepts and the ideas in a way that the average Joe Schmo can understand it because, well, at least that's my take on it. Because what really happens is they talk in circles, they confuse you, and then you just eventually go, okay, whatever, just hey, don't lose my money, right?
Right. Right.
But
And just make it easy. Don't lose my money. Let me ride and do my own thing, kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, and I that's not how I operate. I mean, if you don't understand what we're doing, then I'll explain it again, and I'll
Right.
explain it again, and usually 2 years later, I'll explain it again because people are kind of silly and it's I mean it's not unheard of, right? I mean, if you're
Right.
a nuclear biologist and you tell me something about nuclear biology, well, that's not my field, so I might forget, and then when it comes back up, you'd be like, remember when I told you? I'm like, oh yes, I do remember, right? So. But that's just the nature of the beast. But that's what I do.
So when we're thinking about NESARA, you jumped into this. I know you jumped into the RV side of this.
Mhm.
You're connected into the RV because you saw the disconnection of the fiat and the disconnection of all the stupid of the market that didn't make any sense. And then you saw the NESARA piece, which you're one of the very few people, because frankly, I mean, and I say the same thing about my own field as audiology. I mean, most of my field of audiologists they're very left wing on this viewpoint.
Mhm.
I've met a couple audiologists that are on my side of the fence, but I don't even call myself right wing anymore. I just call myself none of it.
Yeah.
I'm totally
I just
outside
call
of it.
myself correct.
Correct. Yeah, just like I don't believe in any of you saw any of these sides.
Yeah.
But my point is like, when we look at this stuff, it's like, when we're sitting here, we're saying none of it is right. And we've said, and when we have the financial planners, they're sitting there holding it's like they're like holding on to sand, and
Mhm.
and the sand is just dripping through their shirt and their hands, and there's nothing left. And
Mhm.
I go, what are you doing? And you're one of the very few people in the world going, this sucker is done. And so, when we think about the debts, the massive debts, not just the national debt, but the personal debts of the $1 trillion, of the personal debts.
Mhm.
What do you think that happens? What do you think those things happen when when the NESARA kind of hits? What's your thought on that?
Well, I've heard two versions. Both of them are acceptable to me. I mean, because I can rationalize, I can understand both of them, but I believe one of them is more correct. But the reality is that the average American is roughly or the average American roughly carries individual, not household, individual roughly carries 25 to $30,000 of revolving debt or credit,
25,
right?
30.
So credit
Okay.
cards, student loans, um, and that's not really factoring in home purchases or mortgages and cars, right? Which are the two largest
And
expenses
how
that
much
most
do
of us
they
have.
carry of cars, for instance, would you say, and that you know of?
I mean,
Oh, you haven't looked at it really?
no, I don't have a good number, but I
Okay.
mean, you think the average car costs $35,000, and most people don't put anything down.
Right.
So
So, and
you
then
know,
and they might have 1 to 2 cars, so then you
mhm,
got another 50,000 of cars,
yeah.
possibly, so 25 to 50 of cars. Okay.
So when you look at the national debt of it, or the national debt, and like it equates to roughly about 100 and $130,000 per individual, I think is what it says on the debt
Right.
clock, something like that. That's a true statement, right? Well, where did that debt come from? The debt came from the interest that we're fraudulently charged, right? Like
Right.
interest was always supposed to be in our benefit, not our detriment, right? So if we gave our money to the bank, if we gave our gold to the bank to hold, then originally the bank said, hey, can I pay you interest if I use your gold to then um, usher other business loans for other people? And that's where interest came from. So they paid you an interest to leverage your money or your gold
Right.
to help others, right? And
Right.
that's how it started. But then somehow it flipped to where we didn't get paid any interest, and we are now paying them interest to borrow our own money from ourselves, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's really weird how that works. If you go back and study the banking system from its inception, they were just holders. Like that's what banks were. They held the gold, they held the money.
Right.
They didn't really do anything else with it. And then they're like, well, we could make some money if we could push this stuff out. And that's, again, that's kind of where that whole concept came from. And somewhere it got hijacked and flipped upside down on its head. I think the way that I have read NESARA, that all corporate or non-personal debt will be wiped away, total zero, right?
Right.
So if you have $10,000 credit card debt, zero. If you have, for me and my wife, with she spent a month in the hospital, $500,000 of medical debt, wiped to zero.
Wow. Ugly.
Yeah. Student loans, because when they changed student loans from private entities, private individuals, private banks, and made it
Right.
federal, right? Which Nancy Pelosi is famous for saying, well, why don't you just lower the cost? And the banker goes, because you guys control it. Like we
Right.
don't do loans anymore. You control federal
Correct.
student loans. She didn't
Yeah.
even know, right? But my understanding is that all debts, hypothecated debts or interest-bearing debts, go to zero. The alternative that I've heard is that the interest gets wiped away and you're just left with the physical principal,
Right.
which again, I can understand. So if you have a house, like right now, for instance, in the last 2 years, because interest rates have gone from roughly 3.25% to over 7% for an average home loan.
Okay.
I mean, just give or take, that basically in a 30-year mortgage adds over $100,000 to the total loan, right? So if you have a $200,000 house, well, just that increase in that 4 or 5% interest adds $100,000 to the total.
Oh, sure. You're 2.5 times of your, on a car or a
Yeah,
house, on these, very significant numbers. You're 2.5 times the amount of the
yeah.
of the principal.
So
Which
the other version that I've heard of NESARA and debt is that the interest gets wiped away and you're just left with the principal,
right.
which again, conceptually, I can understand, but I don't think we get a clean. I think the only way to have a complete reset and a complete redo of the financial system is if we go biblical and Jubilee and we go, everything goes back to zero and you start over. So my personal take is that all debts are wiped away completely, unless it's a personal loan. If I loaned you $10,000,
Sure.
well, then you
Like
still
I
owe me
have
that
I have a loan to
$10,000
my
back.
parents.
Yeah.
I have a personal loan to my parents. Okay.
Yeah.
And or they loan me, and so I've got that on my. I'm working on my passwords. My passwords are on an old crappy password system, and I just put that in my new password systems, and I'm going to owe that to them. And I have
Mhm.
someone like, well, I got a loan on this. So is it going to get paid back to my brother? I'm like, how's it going to get paid back to your brother?
Yeah.
Like your brother wants to write it off, go for it.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next one here. So now let's assume on the secondary one that you said the debt gets written off. So
Mhm.
let's give an example. Um, Dallas has his house,
Mhm.
and Jones Bank, I'm making up something. Jones
Right.
Bank is listed on the title. Now, if you've ever not really looked at your titles, that's what it says. It's Jones title or Jones Bank, and Dallas is written on there. Okay. So what happens to the titles once it's satisfied? We're not going to get into the really what actually occurs there, because frankly we don't really know what that is. But what happens to the titles in your mind?
So it's kind of an interesting question because the reality of titles goes back to maritime law, right? And so even when you have a deed, or a note on your house, even if you've paid it off, if you really read it, you still don't own it, right?
Right.
You just possess the deed to it, but you don't own the property, you don't own the house. And that's all the legal mumbo jumbo that comes from the maritime bar, system. But and that's all going to go away, right? We're going to go back pre 1871, or right? Did I
Right.
screw that up?
1871.
1776, pre 1776, common constitutional law. So deeds and titles will completely change, in my opinion. I think they're going to be completely rewritten. But
Wow.
what we should see is a clear and free transfer of ownership. I like using cars as an example, right?
Yeah,
Because
they're
when you
easiest.
buy when you buy a car, you pay tax, title, and license, right? Well, if I sell that car, the person that buys it from me also pays tax, title, and license. But it's already been taxed, it's already been titled, and it's already been licensed. So why do you have to pay it again? If you sell it again, you have to pay tax, title, and license. So that's a perfect example of how our system has been manipulated to kind of trick us into paying unfair and undue taxes and interest on our property. So, if it's been taxed and it's been titled and it's been licensed, well, then that you only do that once, right? Because it's not like you built a new car and you sold a new car. It's a used car that's got 20,000 miles on it. And I think that when that goes away, when the debts are wiped out, then we're just going to get free and clear titles. And then, like I said, when we go back to common law, I think those titles will probably be rewritten, and it will actually state that we possess the deed, the ownership of the
So,
property, the ownership of the car. Does that make sense?
well, so I mean, yeah, like for instance, I mean, we paid off our son's car, um, and so it took I don't know a couple weeks or whatever, and then boom, it's like my son's car, right? And it
Mhm.
was in my name because it was before it, when we got it, it was before he was of age, so it was like boom, it's in little Scotty's name, and that's all it was. There was no other person. Now, what's weird, and you're sort of intimating that the maritime law, and you have that lawyer that works, in your firm, that financial lawyer kind of thing. Is it possible that we might actually have to replot the land, that little spot of land? We might have to say, not just a title, but this actual, parallel. And I mean, Scott, no, I'm going to suck at this. So this thing, and right in
Yeah,
there.
redraw the lines of I know exactly what you're thinking.
Longitude,
We're gonna try and
latitude, yeah, that thing. You're like, pop, and
yeah.
and that might even say like an actual line in there. Now,
Mhm.
now, obviously, people are going to get mad because what happens if I lost the land in a court battle, or if I lost the, I mean, and listen, guys, I don't know. I don't know, and nor does Dallas know what would happen if you lost the land. You just got in a bankruptcy issue too. By the way, Dallas, our friend uh, that I introduced you to is trying to call me. So something interesting is up. So I'll just tell you that.
Yeah, if you want to take it and come in and tell us good news, I'll bring up the next question and I'll just
I
randomly
how
talk.
how about I do that? Would you mind if I did that? And it's such an important call. I'm gonna bring up this next one here.
Yeah,
And then I'm gonna take care of that. So do you think that loans will happen for people with simple interest? Could you explain the simple versus compound interest? Do you think you could do that one there?
yeah,
Okay, guys, I'm going to do this. I know I don't do this, but I mean, I think Dallas can do this really well. I just got this really crazy call, and I think it might be really good. So,
yeah. Well, really, the difference between compounding interest and simple interest is the easier one to explain. Simple interest is if you get 5% interest, you just take the total value and multiply by 5%. Boom. So if you have, we'll do some math here for you. You have $100,000, you get 5% interest multiplied by 5%. So you get an increase of $5,000. So now you have $105,000. Compounding interest is what takes the total value and it raises it. And every year it gets bigger and bigger, bigger. So, if you have, and compounding interest is, it grows faster, but it's also a little bit more complex. And again, when it's used in our benefit, it's great, right? So for instance, in certain kinds of permanent or whole life insurance policies, depending on who the company is and if it's a good reputable company, they provide what's called compounding interest in the cash value. So it grows exponentially. It's beneficial to us. Where compounding interest is used against us is in debt, right? So you buy new tires for your car, and let's say the tires, all four of them cost $1,000. But then you buy some groceries and maybe take a trip. And so instead of paying simple interest on the $1,000 for that purchase, you get charged compounding interest on the total. And that compounding interest typically is calculated daily. So every day you add something to that.
Right. And it's
total,
added in there in that circumstance.
and
Right.
so every day you're paying an interest rate, or you're being charged an interest rate that is on an ever increasing number, right?
Right.
So used against us is terrible. Used for us, could be beneficial, but loans in the future, my understanding is loans are going to completely change. If you don't technically have the money to back up the loan, then my understanding is that you won't be given a loan, right? Like now,
Real
loans are
interesting.
given to virtually anybody. You can not have a job, you cannot have any kind of collateral, and if you talk to the right person at the right time, sure, here's $5,000, right? That's why payday loan companies and like
Right.
car title loan companies they just exploded over the last decade. It was shared with me that loans in the new economy, if you don't have a way to validate the request for the loan, then you probably won't be given the loan, right? If you want to buy a $1 million house, but you only have $500,000 in your bank, they're not going to give you a loan for $1 million because you don't have a way to verify it, right? And they're going to try and stop us from putting ourselves in the same situation we find ourselves in now. But again, that's a little bit of kind of an outside thought process, but
Well,
I've
this
also
leads
been told that only simple interest will exist in the
well,
future.
this leads me into another system, and I want to throw this one out at you and ask you if what it feels like. Now, you might not go, I don't know. But just I want to throw something out at you. My father-in-law, he's 89. And he was pitching something at me. He's an old ag banker. And I was listening to him with and I think it was Thanksgiving, and we were sitting there after the dishes are cleared, and he goes, "There's a loan called the 7/8." Now, if you've ever listened to me, you've heard me actually say something about this. But basically, what the 7/8, and I might say this slightly wrong, so forgive me, okay? But basically, $1,000, and again, don't get off on the details too much, okay? But basically, $1,000 loan, and it was, and let's say it's let's say you're paying back $50 a month. Again, don't worry about the exact number, and a simple interest. What you do is you pay the the interest upfront, just like you would do in a upfront loan today. So they always upfront load the interest anyway, right? So you're always doing this, but so the bank gets paid back, but you're talking about in the first 6 payments, the bank gets paid back of the total amount, and so the bank gets paid back in their first 6 payments or so, and they get paid back, and then after that, you're running into the principal. Every single dollar is paid into the principal. Now there is, I mean, obviously you're paying interest in this, but the bank is then assured of that amount. Number one. Number two, he mentioned that, and this was only in the 60s and earlier. So even in the fiat system, number two, it was simple interest based. So when that kind of system happened, you would never give a loan, using your example, $500,000 loan or $500,000 in the bank, and someone wanted $1,000,000. Well, they wouldn't have the old system of the credit score. But they would say, listen, you can't afford $1,000,000 house.
Right.
No, if you want to buy a, I'm making up a number, you want to buy an X number house, we look at your budget. Your budget tells us that we think you can afford X. This is all we're going to loan you. I mean,
Yeah.
based upon your numbers, this is what we think you could actually pay for. I mean, I was listening to a TikTok the other day, and I know that sounds funny, but I only listen to TikTok for like maybe 15 minutes at most in a day, and that might be every third day. Okay, so every once in a while, and there's some really clueless kids and clueless adults too. I mean, but it was like there's these kids that were talking about, how much should you spend on an engagement ring, and these girls, and they're all thinking that they're all hot stuff, and well, you should spend at least 6 figures on an engagement ring. What?
I mean,
And
there were 6 numbers in my in the engagement ring, and
yeah,
that's 6
exactly. There's
figures.
6 numbers, but you add the pennies up, kind of thing. And I was like going, you gotta be kidding me. I was like going, probably it wasn't that many. It was probably $1,000 on the ring that we bought. I don't think I spent more than that.
I was counting the change decibels.
Oh yeah, there you go. So yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, yeah, if you want to add the other numbers on there, or add the little put the little dollar
Yeah.
sign on there. Shut up, and but see, it's that kind of stuff. We have a disconnect, but when we have real banking people who are really looking at your budget going, sorry, you both make $25,000 a year, you don't have that capability to purchase that. You're
Yeah.
going to be in major issue, because guess what, the bank is going to be on the lurch for that. They can't go sell that loan again. And so I just wanted you to think about this system here. Do you think that's possible, that the bank, because what that means is the bank would be responsible for that kind of loan in that way? Have you heard anything about that? Or is that
I
something
can't say that I've ever heard the 7/8 verbiage, but I do believe that if loans are a thing in the new economic system, that it would have to be something like that, right? Where one, it's simple interest, but it would have to be something that you would have bona fide collateral guaranteeing that you could pay the loan back in order to get the loan, right?
right?
Because what they want to do is the whole point of this transition is to is to give us a reset, right? It's a do-over. It's kind of like a mulligan in golf.
Without
Man,
getting into a bad system,
yeah.
right? Where you're in debt again.
Yeah, and so they want to keep us out of that, right? So they're going to make it kind of hard for us to do that. But Social Security is going to go up. We're going to get our straw man money back. We're going to get paid back all of the fraudulent income tax we paid, all the fraudulent interest that we paid on past loans and past mortgages. Which I mean, depending on how old you are, I mean, that should be a pretty substantial amount. We've, as an adult, this is my second home that we're in now, but we should all be in way better financial stability. And then the goal is to not jump right back into debt, because we will have more than we've ever had So just be content and just find that happy medium, you know?
Right. So there's a lot of struggles in here. Yeah. So there's a lot of struggles that are I'm seeing in here. And by the way, I'm dealing with a bank issue right now with my father-in-law who broke his hip, and the bank is like screwing with us right now because they won't give us access, even though we have power of attorney and we have all the capability to get into the bank. But there's a little tweaky thing that we haven't gotten right, and the bank is screwing with us. Like, I mean, going, we have a trust, we have power of attorney, but you won't let me look at his accounts, even though I have all the information in front of me, right?
Yeah.
Ugh. Um, and what I heard from my lawyer is that every single bank in Oklahoma is doing this. And I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" And he, in what time frame? He goes, "In this calendar year." And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me!" And it's happening all over the place. So I think that there is an issue between small banks and the Fed banks. Now, what you know, I think the small banks aren't the cabal banks, right? Would you agree with that, or what do you feel like on that?
Yeah, until they get bought by them. Yeah. I mean, a lot of small regional or local banks are started by businessmen and women that, you know, want to deal with a whole lot of crap and a whole lot of headache and a whole lot of red tape, but at the same time make pretty good money after a certain period of time. Um, but there's a reason that 99% of them get bought by one of the big tier one banks, Wells Fargo, Chase,
Right,
because they let them. I mean, it's actually a brilliant strategy, right? Like let the little minions do all the hard work and go through all the hard times and the struggles, get the bank to where it's functioning, kind of running smoothly, and then sweep in and buy them for a big chunk of money. Which is why most individuals or small groups open banks. I mean, they open the
right.
bank not because they want to be a banker for the rest of their life. They open the bank knowing that one of the big three or four is going to swoop in a few years and pay them a hefty sum to buy it out from underneath them, and that's how they make the money.
Wow.
But
Okay, so then, what's going to happen to the Fed bank types, the 13 big Fed banks? What would you think? Are they going to exist at all?
they will, but they're going to change dramatically, right? I mean, one, the Federal Reserve was never federal. It was an entity owned by the central bank, the global central bank, which was owned by the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, the 13 Venetian families. So our Federal Reserve and our central banking system has never been owned or operated by we, the people of the United States. It's always been owned by non-citizens. So the Federal Reserve no longer exists. The central bank, what will happen is much like the central bank of Iraq or the central bank of Russia, which is just the centralized banking mechanism within that particular country, but they're not a part of the cabal central banking system, right? Which is why Russia is public enemy number one, and Putin is, you know, a terrible human being because he's been bucking the central banks for decades. That's why we went in and invaded Iraq, because they wanted to separate and pull away from the central bank. That's why we overthrew Cuba. That's why we overthrew Gaddafi, because they wanted to pull out of the central banking system. Um, what will happen is we'll have a central bank of the United States, but it will be run and functioned under our control, right? It won't be a part of the global system. And Russia will have theirs, and Iraq will have theirs. But the banks will change from a revenue generating machine to what they originally were created to do, and that was really to be a vault or a storage place for our money, as we then control 100% of our transactions, because we will be, with the QFS system, we will in essence be our own bank. We'll be able to proctor and complete transactions seamlessly without the need of the bank, or the need of transferring money from one account to another and then wiring that to Joe Schmo's account in another country. We'll just be able to send it over and it will happen within seconds. So banks will in essence cease to exist. I think banks in general will be more of a resource center than anything
I,
else. So if you want to open a new business, or if you want to expand into a new market or into a new country, well, then I think in the near future we'll go to the banks and say, "Hey, I need to talk to your corporate business specialist, or your corporate business attorney, or your franchise attorney, to work out the details of this thing that I want to do." But there's going to be a resource center for us, is what I think is coming.
okay. Well, you just I threw in. I'm throwing another question here because you just threw up a well, threw up. Gosh, why'd you throw up here? But you just
Yeah,
put in another question. I
verbally
think
it happens a lot.
yeah, well, happens because this is a cool one. Yeah, I'm going to throw this one out at you now because there's a lot of question, and I just heard a TikToker that kind of doesn't really understand the Basel III, kind of compliance here. But you said the term, Central Bank of Iraq, and I got a lot of people who hear Central Bank of Iraq and their positioning, or Central Bank of Russia, and it doesn't really matter the name, but will they exist for later on? Will they be Basel IV compliant, which is potentially the gold-backed point? So how would you position
Those
that?
are the only banks that will exist. Are the asset backed
Okay, good. Okay,
system.
that's a good way to say it. So will Central Bank of Iraq actually exist, or will they kind of rename themselves something else, you think? Or how would you look at that?
I've heard two theories on this. One, they're going to continue to use some common verbiage or vernacular for the everyday Joe Schmo that has no idea what we're talking about, so that
Like
they kind of
CBI,
understand.
but then for a time, and then they might just sunset it a little bit, or
Yeah, or it might become the National Bank of Iraq,
oh,
or
yeah,
you know what I mean. Like, instead of the central bank, it'll be the Bank of Iraq, or the Bank of the
okay.
United States. Does that make sense?
Or northeastern Iraq, and then southeastern Iraq, and
Yeah.
and maybe regionalize it a little bit so that it can be easier. And yeah, okay. I mean, because I mean, I've said for a very, very long time, we don't need these really super globalized banks,
Mm-mm.
with the small regional banks. We don't need the globalized banks, because if you got an app on your phone, I can access anywhere I want to go. I
Mhm.
mean, with a small bank, that's going to go where I want to go. Number one. Number two, I don't need to have the Chase banks anymore. Number two, we're still going to have some level of traditional banking until people get away from checks and credit cards and stuff like that. So we're going to have some level of that, until we get to the QFS, and where people realize that Scott can send money to Dallas just as easily through the QFS.
And
One,
faster.
and faster, and
Yeah.
and frankly, not just faster, but without anyone touching it.
Yeah.
There's no regulation point that I can
No
send.
middlemen, no, like right now, what the banks are doing in Texas and really all over is they're taking normal transactions, normal money transfers, and they're sitting on them for 10 days,
Right,
which
right,
before they might sit on them for 24 hours, maybe a day, 2 days. Now they're arbitrarily, you put in a check, they're like, oh, we're gonna have to hold this check for 10 days. Why?
right, for no reason, because
Yeah, because
they're desperate for cash.
oh,
So what?
100%.
And listen, I don't sell anything, my stuff. I'm not trying to do stuff. And people ask me all the time, why don't you sell stuff in your thing? You could make money. I don't, on purpose. That has been something God told me. I never care if anyone else sells anything. They can sell as much or little as they want to. I don't care. You can donate on my site. You can buy a book. Yeah, I don't care what you do. But let's say, because I know that Dallas actually has been losing weight, which is so cool. And he's been using something, therootsbrand.com /Dallas PPN. So let's say Scott wants to spend $30 a month with a particular thing. Okay. So in the near future, let's say that in a very, very near future, in October, I go, oh my gosh, there's this little thing and it's $30 a month, right?
Mhm.
And so the QFS is fully on board. Okay. So I utilize my QFS account. Okay. And I, instead of me going and swiping a credit card, well, virtually swiping a credit card thing and using his system, his root brand, the rootbrands.com/ppn, Dallas ppn, which takes, all that other, potentials for going through the virtual systems of me, through Visa and all this other stuff,
Mhm.
and all the transaction fee points, right?
Mhm.
Then what has to happen is that there's transaction fees for Dallas, right? He gets dinged out of there too, and the
Mhm.
root brands ding him. Here's the other cool way. If we have just the QFS, directed QFS, he gets no ding. Neither does the root brands, right? So there's a
Mhm.
straight direct right through root brands, and then he gets a higher commission at that point. And I'm not trying to like just help with that, but it's a direct thing, and no one actually tracks that. And so that's what he's talking about. Am I kind of
Yeah.
correct in that way?
Yeah.
So I think those are the possibilities for you. But I also know for a dang fact that's exactly my belief is that the XRP and the XLM is going to be some of the. This is my thing. XRP XLM is going to be the. I believe that it's going to be part of the helper for checks and credit cards to help with the transfer function of that. But it's
Yes.
not really for the QFS, because the QFS is a type of crypto. It has its own crypto capability already built into it. It
Yeah.
doesn't need to have XRP. But the Visa and the Mastercard doesn't have any kind of capability for moving that money. And without a central bank, there's no connector.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No. Yeah, that's how it's been explained to me too. I mean, the XRPs and the XLMs and those will be the way that we move money, and it will move instantaneously. And to your point, there won't be fees or costs because it's digital, right? It would just
Right.
boop, boop.
No, XLM and XRP will get a fee from the transfer function. With let's say in that example, root brands would kick a fee back out to XRP. Let's say so they might kick but it's a tiny little fee. We're talking
Yeah,
about
it's
like a
fractional
three
as opposed to
cents.
being yeah, yeah,
Versus when I pay, you guys don't understand. I'm a business owner. When I pay a fee, you guys have no idea. I mean, if they swipe the credit card, I get a lesser fee than if they pop in the credit card. If they don't and they tell me over the phone, and if there is some problem with it, and we have to read in the card and punch it in, then I get a bigger fee. Mean I get screwed more. And if I get American Express, God forbid, because it's 5%. And it's just that way. But guess what happens with what we're talking about here? XRP people and XLM people could make a buttload of money. Um, and just we're talking about 3 cents maybe, or some ridiculous tiny number.
yeah,
But it's not going to hurt XLM. It's not going to hurt the banking systems. It's not going to hurt root brands. It's not going to hurt the end users in that way. So
yeah.
yeah. Anyway, so I was sorry going off on a little bit of there. Sorry, my
No,
little
no.
things. Um, by the way, are you? I'm presenting this, but uh, are you thinking about doing some things with Patriots, some wealth management things? Is that something that you'd be interested in that, or you want to kind of push that out there, or because I know Patriots are really struggling with a lot of that kind of thing. Do you want to say something about that down the
You
road?
mean like offering my services
Yeah, is
to
that
them?
a possibility? I mean, will you
Yeah,
be
yeah.
open for that down the road? I mean, will you have openings for that in the down the road with your group, your fellowship
Yeah.
group?
Yeah. If they email me at DallasPPN@gmail.com and just ask to be put on the list, um, after the RV, I'm not really responding to emails, especially those that are after the RV until until after the RV.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
I'm putting him on the spot, guys. I'm putting him on the spot. Please don't think you're going to get a personalized email from Dallas in this way. Yeah. Okay.
well, yeah, because I don't have the time to respond to them because they're, I mean, they're literally, you know, there's a lot of them. But if you would like to speak to my team after the RV and just I'm not going to charge a fee. I could, but I don't charge fees. I never have. It'll be a free consultation just to talk and see what options are and what options are out there, because that's the other part of this whole thing. And one of the reasons that I have dove in so deeply into it is because my whole profession is going to change almost virtually overnight. And I don't exactly know how it's going to change, but I also know that I'm on the forefront of that change. And so, we're going to, I have a team, and,
But your
we
team
will
is
be
going
able
to have to
to,
grow. I can tell you this, guys. Everyone who's listening is I'm telling you this. I have been hearing this in the spirit. I have been hearing this so much in the spirit. I've been talking to my own staff about this thing, and guys, business professionals who are listening right now, um, if you are a patriot, and especially with truthers, I've been beat up. Dallas gets beat up all the time too, and I talk to truthers like crazy with this. But when this thing flips, when the pendulum flips from here to here, what's going to happen is that people are going to seek people out like Dallas, and they're going to go, I want a patriot, I want a truther, and he's going to get overwhelmed with this, and so be patient. They're
Mhm.
going to want financial planners, and they're going to like come over to our clinic, or our audiology clinic, and just and I won't be able to see you. I can already tell you right now, I'm never going to be able to see patients anymore. But we're already getting some of that, but it's going to happen for us. And people, I've already had it, but it's like it's going to happen that way because that pendulum's going to swing over, and when it does, it's going to be gigantic. And so you as the business professionals out there have to be ready for that. Be ready for the changeover of God, because I'm going to tell you that you need to kind of keep his information in your back pocket. So
Yeah.
and because
And
it's
it's a
coming.
very small group, and I've told this story a couple times today already. But yesterday I had a meeting with my managing partner. So he's the guy that is over me and within the firm that I'm a part of. And for the first time, I just kind of broke it down and said, "Hey, man, this is what I think is coming. I think it's coming real fast, and it's
A
and I
flood.
and yeah, and he's and this is the kicker. He's a conservative. He's a very smart guy. He's been in the financial world for 15, almost 20 years. He's very with it, but he only knows the world that is presented to him, right? And so I started sharing, and I and I didn't even go into the weeds. I kind of stuck with the BRICS nations, and and what was happening with the changeover of the fiat currency and those kind of things. And he didn't even know what I was talking about. Like he
Right.
literally had zero clue. He goes, "What are you talking about? Like bricks of gold or silver?" And I was like,
Oh
I
my
said, "Well,"
gosh.
I said, "Sort of." I mean, gold and silver is a part of it. And said the BRICS nations are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, but they are asset backed currency, or they're countries that have gone asset backed, and they now control 60% of
75%
GDP.
or
Yeah,
more. Yeah.
yeah. And I said what, because his question was, well, how do you know this is going to happen? Or he said, what if this doesn't happen? And I said, well, if it doesn't happen, then we're going to be Venezuela within the next 6 months, because what has already happened is all of the companies or the countries that we buy oil from have either been ushered into BRICS,
Right.
or they're in the process of becoming part of BRICS, which
Iraq,
means we
Saudi
will not be
Arabia.
able to purchase oil because they will not accept our currency. So I know this is going to happen because there is no other option in my mind. and I said, when we go to asset backed, when we become an asset backed currency, there's going to be this huge shift of wealth in the country, and it's going to be it's going to be a very small percentage, but it's that small percentage is going to control 95% of the wealth in this country. And I said, I've positioned myself exactly like Dr. Scott just said. I've positioned myself to be that leading voice. You don't have to work with me and my team.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine with me, because there's going to be too many. I mean, we're going to take care of it, and we're going to take care of everybody, but there's going to be more than we can handle. But you don't have to work with me. But I positioned myself to be the go-to person to at least have a conversation with. And I said I did that for the betterment of our firm. And when the time is right, I'm going to come and tell everybody in the firm what is about to happen and how we're going to take care of the clients. And there will be no discussion. But he literally didn't know what I was talking about, right? And
Yeah.
but he is the norm, right? In the financial world.
Right.
And I equate it to all the people that go into their banks and they talk to their, the teller. Hey, is your bank Basel III, Basel IV compliant? What about the new currency? Are you doing?
Yeah. What's
gaming?
QFS?
Yeah, QFS. And those poor tellers don't have a clue what you're talking about, because they are not told, and they're not privy, and they're not looking, right? The only people that you will have conversations with that have a clue what you're talking about probably are ones you've already woken up, or you've already kind of clued into this and they've started digging on their own, or people that dug on their own. I started digging on my own. Nobody in the corporate structure of any of the companies that I've worked for over the last 13 years, they all think I'm nuts, but I'm the only one that knows I'm right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we were, as I was leaving the meeting yesterday, I could tell he was, I just blew his brain up. I said, call a mutual friend of ours, and I won't give his name out, but I said, call a mutual friend of ours, and he'll confirm everything I just said to you.
Right.
Because he is one of 5.
But see, the evidence is there. It's like and the funny thing that's happening, and what we're talking about here, is that the evidence is there. It's like we're telling them the grass is green there. There's trees over there. There's purple roses, or red roses over there, and there's purple flowers over here. And they're going, I don't see them. Where? And I'm like, are you blind? And we're talking about financial people. I'm going, did you not? I mean, and I see them every day, and they do this, and they're driving to work like this.
Yeah.
And I'm going, what is wrong with you? It's because they're so terrified. And as we kind of end up here, they're so terrified of what's happened. All they're doing is putting out cat videos. They got nothing left. They're so tired, and they're so tired of everything.
Well, and they live in a delusion, right?
Yeah.
And that's what really sucks, right? Because when you point this stuff out to them, and you say, like, BRICS is on the news, right? Like, how
Every
he
day.
didn't know what I was talking about. I was just, it literally, that almost blew me away, right? But they just live in a constant state of denial. No, nothing's ever going to change. The US dollar is awesome. The market is awesome. Blah, they just live in this bubble of denial. Every bigwig that I've talked to in the 3 major, I've worked for the 3 of the 4 largest insurance and investment firms in the United States. All of them great companies. But I've talked to, in one case, talked to the CEO, one of them. He will be calling me, I'm sure. But Every time I had these conversations with, upper management or like kind of the leadership of these companies, they're just like, oh, that's not real. That's not a true thing. It's kind of like the Iraqi dinar. Oh,
Right.
that's a conspiracy theory. There, you're just getting ripped off. Mm, I think the Kurdistan people would disagree today, and they just live in this world of denial that nothing can disrupt the power of the country and the U.S. and the economy,
Yep.
and they don't even pay attention to what's going on around them. It's really weird.
I'll just leave you with this. I have had this vision for a very long time. And I know I'm sorry, I'm moving around here. My camera just loves to move with me. So anyway, I'll leave you with this vision. And I'm telling you, you're looking at a guy, Dallas, who is this person. But here's the point I want you to feel. Number one, there is a verse that says the last shall be first and the first shall be last. When it talks about that, that is absolutely a heavenly verse. It is not an earthly verse. And I've checked it out. Trust me, it is. But then God started to bring it up and go, but you know what? I think you might want to relook at that verse. I'm like, yeah, but I know it's a heavenly verse. I know when what it was first referring to is that you come into heaven, and it's talking about those who have stored up treasures in heaven. Okay, and as you store up your treasures, if you walked into heaven, this is partly due to it's not only in this section. It's not really fully in this section, but it's First Corinthians 13 through 18. It's not. This isn't where this verse is in that, but it has that reference to that, the inference in that viewpoint. But see, some of these people walk into heaven, they walk into heaven naked in essence. Okay. Um, and yet, so some of these people are going to walk into heaven, they're going to walk into heaven with nothing. Okay. That means they're in the back wall. Now, my very first experience of coming into a back wall of an event was getting at 13 years old. I got to see Annie on Broadway. It's very only time I've ever been on Broadway was to watch Annie, and I was on the back wall of the theater. It was cool. I loved it. I didn't care if I was in the back wall. And if you were in heaven, you wouldn't care if you were in the back wall, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing that I've been seeing very, very clearly. Many of you people have been feeling like beat up. You've been feeling persecuted, and on daily for this. Some of you have lost your house. You've done everything you could. You weren't sitting around screwing around, but you've done these things trying to keep your head above water, and you lost your job and you lost this, and you worked everywhere you could. You did everything you could, and the debt's piling up just because this systems, the business systems are falling apart. I mean, the chains are coming off, and Joe Biden's falling over in another bike event. And so what we're dealing with right here is that you feel like you're always in the back of the line. I mean, my last name is Young. I always got picked last because I was always worst. So I was in the back line. And so I was never the kid, with the B who's always in the front, you know. And so what I'm telling you is I've been seeing in the spirit, the ones that are in the back are going to come to the front. And I'm telling you, while you have seen Dallas on, Rumble and now on YouTube, um, you're going to see him on YouTube with this one. What you've seen him in that way, you're going to see him on stages, and he's going to be standing up there, and you're going to see his compadres, the financial geniuses, are going to sit back there, and they're going to go, he's blowing our minds because he's speaking. And we're not talking about the cabal ones, but they were just too stupid, because they weren't speaking the truth and they weren't following the information. And we're not even talking about the really bad people. We're talking about like the Glenn Becks, who were all they were just talking about is the Great Reset stuff. And I'm like, the Great Reset is not the problem. That
Yeah.
thing is dead, sucker. So first shall be last, the last shall be first. And you're seeing one of them. And I think that you guys need to really support him in that way. So Root Brands is one of the ways that you guys can actually jump in there and check it out. Just go poke around on there and see if you can find him. But you can also look for him at DallasPPN at gmail.com. And I really think that, I've told most of you guys to park your money. If you're scared about the market, park your money in a money market, and that just puts it in a parking place. Okay.
Yeah.
It
It's just a holder.
it's just a holder. That's where I've done for a lot of my money because I'm holding it in the market. And as soon as it hits the bottom, I'm moving my money right over. And by the way, Dallas is my guy. So I'm
Yes.
just moving that. I'm waiting. I'm all on a holding pattern because I'm not smart enough to do the stuff. And then he's gonna move it in. I'm gonna let him go hog wild and go crazy with that. And it's not him. I'm gonna let his staff do that. Okay, because I'm going to have I trust his staff to do that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of way, and he's going to be able to have staff all over the nation to be able to do that. So I'm just telling you, this is what I'm doing. Okay, this is what I recommend in that way. So, you have any last words about where we are? We're on the 29th of the month. What are you feeling at the last?
Yeah. I am really optimistic, about where we are, what's coming. I think this is going to be a really, really pivotal weekend. And I say it every time. I'm not in charge. And Dr. Scott said it right out the gate. If I was in charge, I'd have flipped the switch 3 years ago and just saw what happened. Right? I might have blown up the world, but I'm like, screw it. Let's see what happens. Right? All I do is I relay information, and I was talking to one group the other night, and like my wife yelled. Well, she didn't yell at me, but she was like, literally last night, she said, "You said that like last week and the week before and the week before that." And I was like, "I know I did, but I didn't know 3 weeks ago. I didn't know 6 weeks ago. I didn't know 6 months ago what I know today. Right? Like what I know today is way different than what I even knew yesterday, to be honest with you." But I share about 20% of the information that I get that gets shared with me.
You're right.
And so when you are disappointed when a time comes and goes, I am infinitely more disappointed because I know I had more information. Like I have specifics, I have verbiage. I mean, the one I go back to is Trump's speech on November 15th of last year. Like I was given quotes from his speech. He is going to say this. He's going to say this. And he didn't say a damn one of them.
I know.
not,
I
not
know.
a one of them. And I was like,
I know it.
what? And I was totally pissed off. But I believe, I mean, again, if Iraq paid money out through the HCL,
Which they
and there
did.
are people, and Nader said on his video that he looked at his account and he got paid.
Yep.
If people got paid, that means they have a rate. It hasn't been announced yet, but tomorrow would be a really good day, I think, for them to announce it publicly in the Gazette. But I think, with what's happening with Iraq over the weekend could be pivotal.
Plus, we're at the end of our fiscal budget is tomorrow.
Correct. And the government shuts down tomorrow night, right at midnight.
Yeah. And or Sunday is the dead, the
Sunday
dead
at 12:01. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, guys, we're there. I know we've missed, the 912 for the EO 13848, and I know, but they extended it. Guys, we're there. We're so there, and it's not where you want, but we're in the war.
And money is liquid, and there are upper tiers in the bonds. I mean, there is liquid money being moved and purchased. Things being purchased, products and supplies being purchased to bring into countries. That has never happened. I mean,
Yep.
They've been able to see, a lot of the bondholders have been able to physically see the money
Yep.
for weeks.
And
So when we
it's
say it's been
moving.
going, it has. It just keeps getting stopped.
It's moving, and that's and when this thing flips, you are going to it'll make your teeth rattle. So trust me, it's there. So
Yeah, I'm
hey, thanks,
excited.
man. I really
Hey, thank you,
appreciate
bud.
it. All right.